Hello everybody, MechaZardX here, back at it again to give y'all another very exciting video. And for today's video, we're going to be talking about those Insomniac leaks. Yes, we know that news broke out a little bit over a month ago, and there's been a lot of buzz going around it. Obviously, you know, all this information that was pulled was through nefarious means, and I'm not going to be going through and talking about, you know, the fact that there's a playable build of Wolverine floating around there right now and all those future projects and stuff that Insomniac is working on. No, that's not the meat and potatoes for this video right here, but I want to take the time to sit down with y'all and go through, I think, something that's a bit more important and something that's on the grander scale of this PlayStation's business model in general, and that's these inflating costs for the budgets of these AAA games. Because oh shoot, man, I looked at some of the numbers on some of these PowerPoint slides and I'm like, there's no way that they're going to be able to keep this sustainable. Like the cost of like Spider-Man 2's development, it just completely blew my mind. So I'm just going to be going through just my thoughts on, you know, the stuff we got out of the leaks in terms of that little bit of information, some things that actually have already transpired in terms of, like, you know, Sony already canceling some live service games and stuff, and then just talk about the future strategy where Sony's probably likely going down, but really honestly they should be going down this path instead though. So if you hadn't already done so, make sure you go and hit that like button, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and that bell to stay up to date on all things video game related I feel like talking about and discussing. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and jump straight up into this video. All right, so let's go ahead and start looking at some of these numbers that are reported for some of these games in terms of their budget price, like the revenue that they basically got, the cost it took, and then basically the overall profit. Now, with all of these examples, if I'm referring to the leaks, I can't actually show you that, you know, the actual stuff. I don't want Sony breathing over my, you know, my back like that though, but I'm just gonna go ahead and describe what I'm seeing here through some of these leaks though. All right, so looking at some of the information from Spider-Man 1, the remaster itself, like what the revenue for it was 50 million roughly, the total cost was like 39 million dollars, and then like the total profit was like 11 million. Pretty good though. But then you look at a mid-sized game with Miles Morales, then you see like what the revenue was 260, cost was 156, total profit was 104 million. So quite a big jump in terms of total profit from 11 million to 104. So that's all right though. Now, the one interesting thing to look at was Ratchet and Clank's, which is weird with this little bit of information we got on here because it technically got updated. So this one slide I'm looking at is not 100% accurate though, but rest assured the profit on that barely managed to hit profit. At first, people were wondering whether or not, you know, Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart managed to actually get a profit off of it. They might have thought it went into the negative or in the red, but rest assured it managed to sell just enough units for that game where it is profitable, but it's not a huge standard profit. Remind y'all, this is a business at the end of the day. Sony, with most of these things they want to do, they want to easily get over like 100 million in terms of profit if they can get it for whether it be a mid-sized game or a full-blown AAA game. Now, the interesting thing is Spider-Man 2. The total revenue cost for that game was 390 million. Not too shabby though, but the total cost was roughly around 315 million. Now, all of this stuff can either be projected or actual numbers. It's what Sony's basically thinking. So the fact that Spider-Man 2 cost $315 million, oh shoot. You got to take a step back and think, well, this isn't necessarily one of their pure IPs in the sense that it's something that they created. Like, they didn't go through and create, it's not like God of War, or it's not like a Horizon or Ratchet and Clank. It's not one of those things. Obviously, they're borrowing this IP from Marvel themselves, so obviously there's some costs going into just being able to use their IP Spider-Man within their games though. So obviously that's probably some of the reason why the cost of it is so high, but by the time you factor that, by the time you factor in the game development side, and then by the time you do all the marketing and stuff, the stuff you got to do within the retail stores and stuff, as well as, you know, just promoting it, whether it be on YouTube ads, whatever, you know, commercials on TV, the fact that it's $315 million, that's just honestly not sustainable. Like, oh shoot. So you want to know why the cost of games from the $60 MSRP that we're used to with the PlayStation 4 is happening to go up to $70 right there. This is probably part of the reason why over here, because as you saw with that cost of like what, the $315 million with Spider-Man 2 right there, like that's just abysmal right there though. And then even when you look at future projects for like Spider-Man 3, when they start to predict that it could even go up like an additional $70 million, like up to $385 million, like, oh shoot, like something's gonna bend or something's gonna break. Like eventually you're gonna raise those costs up so high that there's gonna be a point where the bubbles is gonna burst. And then at some point you might see some studios closing, shutting down and stuff, even from some big heavy honchos such as like PlayStation, or it could be Xbox, or it could be some things from Capcom and what they happen to own. Who knows? With Square Enix though. Eventually we're going to get to that bursting point, and then people are going to have to really start to reconsider exactly how we handle AAA games. It's only going to be a matter of time. Now, one way I think Sony is trying to go through and remedy this in terms of their costs for these games is to find themselves like that golden goose egg of a juggernaut, such as like a Final Fantasy 14 for them, some kind of live service game, or like a Fortnite that can basically get them hand over fist, and that could be a steady way to generate revenue. That's what Sony is basically looking at right here. And their big solution is to come up with several different live service games, a little more than upward to 10. Technically, it's like up to 12 though. And however, we did manage to get a statement from, the CEO itself of Sony saying, hey, we're going to have to cut that number from 12 down to 6. And this is what he had to say. So according to Sony president Totoki, he said, we are reviewing this. We are trying as much as possible to ensure these games are enjoyed and liked by gamers for a long time, said Totoki. Of the 12 titles, 6 titles will be released by fiscal year of 2025. That's our current plan. As for the remaining 6 titles, we are still working on that. So to that, I say right there, hold shoot. You know what? The fact that they had to reduce their studios that are working on live service games from 12 down to 6 to be able to make and, crunch all of that stuff out in the sense of the quality, because you don't want the quantity to overweigh the quantity of things, because you're looking at a steady way to rejuvenate revenue right there. And I just don't think live service is definitely the way to go. And I feel like they probably are already looking at that. Like, for example, you had over here Epic Games already laying off several, of their employees already. And the fact that they have like one of the leading live service games right now with Fortnite. And if they have to go through and have to, lay off some people, you could only think, well, shoot, like for everybody else that happens to be trying to go through and make a live service game, they might be kind of reconsidering this right now. And I think part of it goes into play with Bungie. Thankfully, they managed to hire them and bring them on, and they kind of looked at some of the games that Sony was working over here. It's like, man, y'all gonna serve this to these customers without some salt and pepper? Like they're just gonna throw this food right back at y'all. Like, what are y'all doing over here? And I feel like Sony had a little bit of a wake-up call. It might not have been a full one though, but it's like a half awakening right there though. And they're like, well, we might have to, reconsider the way how we're gonna be going through and trying to distribute out these live service games though. Because, for everyone that happened to throw out there, I feel like for every good success, there's probably like at least 15 or so failures or something like that though. So you had to imagine that Sony's over here thinking like, all right, we know only a couple or few of these are going to stick though. So the quality of these games are going to be up pretty high, and the cost of these games, and they ain't necessarily cheap either though. So I think that's one of the ways they're combating it. But in all actuality, this shouldn't be the way that they should go, because literally The Last of Us Online, we heard news, not too long ago that they had to actually go through and cancel that, because lo and behold, Bungie looked over there at that stuff, kind of probably gave them some tips like, hey, y'all can't send this out the door like this. And lo and behold, when they were looking at it, when they gave us that statement saying, yeah, we could put this game out, but then we had to go through and maintain it and do the upkeep, bump on this, and then lo and behold, we're just going to be known for this one online game, rather than being able to go through and make several different single player games that a lot of people happen to go out there and love, such as like what could be a potential Last of Us Part 3, or maybe even a new IP and stuff. Like, instead of the single player games they're well known for at Naughty Dog, then they'll be focusing on nothing but these online games. So that's something that they kind of want to stray away from, and they're like, yeah, no, let's not go ahead and do that though. So they're kind of recognizing, slowly but surely that live service isn't the way to go though, but we'll have to wait and see exactly what they manage to put out. Now, another way I think they're trying to go through and kind of deal with these costs of these games is definitely branching out from the PlayStation 5 ecosystem, and, for example, putting their games out on things such as PC, as well as even in this, leaked information. Yes, they're even going to be expanding within the mobile market as well, though. We can go ahead and look at some of the numbers that some of these, PlayStation games have managed to sell over here on the PC side of things. So God of War 2018 sold like 2.5 million. Horizon Zero Dawn managed to sell 3.3 mil. Days Gone 1.7. Spider-Man Remaster 1.3. Uncharted Lost Legacy 483,000. Spider-Man Miles Morales 450,000. And Sackboy coming in at like 62.9 thousand though. So not too shabby when you're able to actually go through and sell at least a couple of million for some of your big, heavy AAA games that were first party. Hey, you're actually able to, reaccumulate some of those costs that you happen to put in development, selling it to a whole nother market that probably would have messed with these games because maybe they don't own a PlayStation, or these are your only PC crew and they wanted to kind of try out a first party PlayStation game though. So it is smart of them to be able to branch out and just, send the game out to a lot of other people that probably wouldn't have played it otherwise. I would say the biggest eye opener right here is the fact that in one of their slides, they literally came out and said, yeah, we might need to release some more mid-sized games between major AAA releases just to kind of fill in the gaps. And it will also kind of go hand in hand in terms of, them with their costs and revenue and their profits gained. It can help to fund each other though. And that was probably the most interesting thing I think I saw out of all of these slides right here. So let's go ahead and take a look at this real quick. So according to this slide, they had 4 main objectives. One of them was like a 1 to 3 funding. So one AAA game can fund up to 3 mid-sized games. And in terms of timing, it's like a 1 to 2 ratio. So the development time of one AAA game is comparable to 2 back-to-back mid-sized games. So if you looked at all of this and then you look at point number 3, 1 to 2 spend, obviously with that ratio, they'll basically save $100 million, roughly is what they're kind of predicting over here. And then in that 4th point, they got like a 1 to 3 spend on competitive. So prospects of spending $300 million on 3 mid-sized games total versus 1 AAA is very intriguing. So basically, if I were to break this down in layman terms right here though, the fact that 1 AAA game, such as let's say a Spider-Man 2, can be supported by 3 mid-sized games, it's a no-brainer. You release your 1 big major AAA game, right? Then you release 3 mid-sized games in the meantime before you release your next big AAA game. If you manage to do AAAs and then manage to do mid-sized games, those will be games such as like your Miles Morales, things that could probably take a little less than somewhere between the net range for story mode, 10 to 20 hours, obviously be a bit more if you're like a completionist. Use the funds that you make from those mid-sized games, or 2 or 3 you happen to do, put that towards the funding of the AAA, then do the AAA like that. And then that way, even in terms of like the time stuff, you're still managing to get some really good first party games from Sony, and the wait times don't happen to be abysmal like that. I think Insomniac is basically playing that game in terms of some of the things that they kind of alluded to in this leak in terms of some of their future projects and stuff. Like, you're definitely the most consistent studio out of all the PlayStation studios out there, between your Naughty Dogs as well as like your Sucker Punches and out there and stuff like that. Like, they're the most consistent. I feel like more of their studios are definitely going to hop over and pull from some of these lessons that Insomniac is managing to do and apply it to their own studios, because I think that is definitely the way to go. If you're known for all of these first party Sony games and stuff like that, for your single player driven experiences, this is going to be the structure you're going to have to go and have to adapt to. There's no way you're going to be able to use and be able to make these games, these giant AAA games with these big inflating costs before they happen to burst, and not manage to do some mid-sized games to help to ease people over. Because even when we look at the calendar for 2024 right now, from the month of January when I'm recording this, the only thing we know is like Last of Us Remaster Part 2, and that's it. We know about Helldivers and stuff, that's like a second party game, but nothing else official first party wide. So, this will definitely help build the bridges between these big major gaps, and I think it's definitely a way that Sony's going to have to go towards leaning on in the future. So overall, I would say yes, Sony is in a bit of a pickle in terms of their release schedules, where they're at, in terms of the live service games, in terms of these big inflating costs. And we already kind of seeing the proof is in the pudding with this stuff. And even like Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart barely managed to get over and squeak over with a profit and stuff like that. So I'm like, you know what? Sony has a lot of things to work on. And this doesn't even just apply to Sony. This applies to almost everything out there. Your Capcoms, your Square Enix, all of Xbox's studios as well, though. The cost of games are just going up so abysmally high that at some point the bubble is going to burst. But who in the world is going to be able to adapt to these things right now and be able to say, you know what, let's make these smaller mid-game size, because there's value in having AA games, those mid-size games, and spacing those in between your big AAA. The first company that happens to realize that and manage to get that down is going to be really solid. I think that's one thing Nintendo does fairly well. Like, you have your big tiers of the kingdoms and stuff like that though, but then you have your smaller games like your WarioWares, or like, was it Mario vs. Donkey Kong that's upcoming and stuff like that. They have the formula down pat, but it's more so the matter of fact of PlayStation as well as Xbox and all these other third-party companies, and they realize this before it's too late, before some studios happen to shut down because they blew their budgets. I'm just saying though. Y'all gotta let me know down in the comment section down below what all that you think about this in terms of all this information from the leak stuff, and then some of the things that currently with the news that we managed to get, like, you start putting two and two together and start, applying some things. It's like, well, I don't know exactly where the gaming industry is going though, but if they don't manage to hit the brakes, somebody's gonna fall off the cliff though. But that's all I gotta say on this topic right here. So if you really like this, make sure you're gonna hit that like button, go ahead and hit the subscribe button and that bell to stay up to date on all things video game related I feel like talking about and discussing. So remember, y'all, until whatever video I make next, see y'all.